In two congressmen on the Budget Committee, Republican Scott Rigell of Virginia and Democrat David Cicilline of Rhode Island. Welcome to you, gentlemen. It all sounds, last night I went to bed feeling quite hopeful, and I woke up feeling less hopeful as the days dragged on. I'm like, are we really getting anywhere here? What do you guys think? Let's start with you, Scott Rigell. Are we actually getting to a place, do you think, where within 24, 48 hours, the word deal may be breaking news?
Well, in my short 2.5+ years here in Congress, I've seen this over and over, where there's just a continuance of a lack of definitive action, clearer alternatives that would set America on a better fiscal path. In fact, I introduced a plan just yesterday evening, America First, which is a definitive plan to set us back on a more productive fiscal track. But this has not been the Republican conference's finest hour, and I'm hopeful that once we clear the muddy water here, that we'll get to the real issue, which is long-term spending, and how do we address that?
Now, one of the problems, it seems to me, David Cicilline, is just the rhetoric being used by some people seems so utterly absurd and over the top. And I'm talking today about Dr. Ben Carson. He's a retired neurologist and a new Fox News commentator. This is what he had to say about Obamacare today.
And I have to tell you, Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery. And it is, in a way, it is slavery, in a way, because it is making all of us subservient to the government. And it was never about health care, it was about control.
David Cicilline, what a load of claptrap. The worst thing since slavery. When you hear this kind of nonsense, what is your reaction?
Well, I think I have very strong feelings about the value of health care reform and what it's going to mean in the lives of millions of Americans and what it means for people in my home state. But I think what people want now more than anything is solutions. There's been a lot of name-calling, a lot of very heated rhetoric. But what people want is they want the government open. They want to be sure that America pays its bills and that we're not a deadbeat nation. And then they want to see a process where we can hammer out a long-term deal to reduce our deficit, grow our economy, and get people back to work. And I think there's been a tremendous amount of rhetoric that has really undermined our ability to have that serious conversation. And what we need to do is move quickly to open government, be sure that we have an extension of the debt so we pay our debt, because the impact of not doing that would be devastating to our economy, and then have a process through regular order to go to a budget committee and a conference committee and work it out. There are a lot of great ideas out there, but we need a process, not in the context of a threat to keep government closed or to default. Do those two things and then work together to find real solutions.
I thought a very diplomatic way of avoiding what Dr. Carson actually said there. So let me try with you, Scott Rigell. Come on. When somebody who's an eminent physician, a retired neurologist, goes on national television in that way and says Obamacare is the worst thing to hit America since slavery, that's pretty outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it meets the definition of hyperbole, over the top, and I've been deliberate about not using that type of rhetoric, and I know David has too, in service to his district and to our country as well. We're both members of No Labels, a strong bipartisan effort to bridge the gap here in Washington. And on the very first day of the shutdown, I put out a tweet that said, look, we need to reopen the government. We need to return to regular order. And these are the things that David's mentioned. And there are a number of us that are trying to do just that, to put the American people first and to really grapple with some of the longer-term issues that we face together just as fellow Americans.
It seems to me, Scott Rigell, just to stay with you for a moment, that from the Republicans' point of view, very hard to paint a positive picture here. In a week when, if they hadn't been so intransigent, they could have been hammering Obamacare and the president over perfectly legitimate criticisms of what's in there,
yes, sir,
and also particularly the way it's been implemented. But instead of that, it's been this ridiculous nonsense involving shutting down the government, and as a result, the favourable view of Obamacare has actually risen, according to an NBCW Wall Street Journal poll. So from September to October, a rise in favourability of 7%, whereas who do you blame for the shutdown? Gap between President Obama and Republicans widening to 53% to 31%. So whichever way you try and dress this up, the strategy, it seems to me, is being completely flawed by the Republicans, led by Senator Cruz.
Well, I share your view. Though I really believe that we need a better alternative to what I truly believe is the Unaffordable Care Act. That said, this, you could call it the Cruz strategy or whatever, it's led us into the political abyss and led us into a legislative abyss. It's hurt our country. It's hurt our conference. We've got to get our way out of this, and hopefully in the next day or so, we'll have some type of short-term solution. But Piers, back to the main point is that we've got to, we got to look longer than just a couple of days here. We've got to come to a comprehensive agreement that Democrats and Republicans can saddle up with that puts America on a better fiscal path. This must be done.
Piers, your point is, though, there is no question that there was a small group within the Republican caucus who were really obsessed with repealing or defunding or delaying Obamacare. And it drove, I think, the Republicans to make some bad decisions that resulted in the shutdown of the government and this looming default. I think people now recognize that that's not a good strategy. I think there's been a willingness over the last day or two to understand that we need to open government and we need to avoid a default and then have a process in place for this larger conversation. But that description, I think, obviously is inaccurate. It's really outrageous when you think of the benefits that Americans will feel as a result of Obamacare. But I think the Republican conference has moved away from that. That's all we heard about in the beginning of this debate. I think people realize this is the law of the land. It's here to stay. Let's work and make sure it's working well, improve it where we can, but make sure it works for Rhode Islanders and for people all across our country.
Congressman, thank you both much indeed. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
When we come back.